What if I told you that a single typo once cost a company $225 million? Or that a bridge collapse ended up draining over $1 billion and took lives with it? This isn't just a story about careless mistakes. Well, these are the real-world consequences of human error, arrogance, and rushed decisions. These are history's most expensive disasters where one small oversight destroyed fortunes, wrecked companies, ruined reputations, and sometimes even cost lives. Let's begin this countdown with two chilling examples that prove just how thin the line is between success and catastrophe when billions are on the line. Number 10, NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter. The $327 million metric mistake. In 1999, NASA was riding high on a wave of exploration momentum. The Mars Climate Orbiter was launched with the goal of analyzing the Martian climate and relaying critical information for future missions. It represented years of planning, engineering brilliance, public funding, totaling an eye-watering $327.6 million. The launch was flawless. The data uplink was working. The trajectory to Mars was right on track. And then, just before it was about to enter orbit around Mars, the spacecraft vanished. Gone. No signal. No impact detected. Nothing. After a detailed investigation, conclusion left scientists and engineers stunned. One team working on the mission had used imperial units, while another used metric units. Somewhere in the calculation of trajectory correction commands, the mismatch wasn't caught. So when the orbiter adjusted its course, it didn't just slightly miss it shot far too low and entered Mars' atmosphere at the wrong angle, either burning up completely or flying off into deep space. Years of work, hundreds of millions of dollars, and a major scientific opportunity destroyed by a simple unit conversion error. It's the kind of mistake you'd expect on a high school homework assignment. It's not a space mission with $250 million at stake. NASA overhauled its internal processes, added layers of verification, and forced full coordination across all teams and contractors. But the damage was done. The phrase metric mix-up became synonymous with costly failure, and the incident remains one of the most expensive single calculation mistakes in the history of spaceflight. Number 9, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. $65 billion and counting, April 20th, 2010. Deepwater Horizon, an offshore oil rig operated by British Petroleum, was drilling in the Macondo Prospect, 5,000 feet below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. That evening, a massive blowout occurred during the final stages of well completion. Gas surged up the well, triggering a series of explosions. 11 crew members were killed. The rig burned for 2 days before sinking into the ocean. But the real disaster was only beginning. With the wellhead damaged, oil began leaking uncontrollably into the Gulf. For the next 87 days, an estimated 210 million gallons of crude oil gushed into the ocean, contaminating over 1,300 miles of coastline and devastating marine ecosystems. The images were haunting: birds soaked in black sludge, dead fish floating in crimson-tinted water, entire fishing towns economically paralyzed, tourism vanished, livelihoods crumbled. The environmental impact was beyond catastrophic, but what makes this disaster even more unforgivable is how preventable it was. In the months leading up to the blowout, there were multiple warnings. Tests revealed inconsistencies in well pressure. Engineers raised concerns about the integrity of the cement sealing the well. But BP, eager to speed up production and save costs, pressed forward. On the day of the explosion, critical pressure test data was misinterpreted. A last-minute decision was made to replace heavy drilling mud with lighter seawater, a move that reduced well stability. One poor choice stacked on top of another until the entire system failed. The financial consequences were staggering. BP was hit with over $65 billion in cleanup costs, lawsuits, regulatory fines, and restitution payments. The company's market value plunged. Its CEO faced congressional grilling and public outrage. Meanwhile, the long-term damage to marine life, coral reefs, and the livelihoods of Gulf residents may never fully be repaired. It was one of the clearest examples in modern history of how corporate negligence, fueled by profit motive, can spiral into one of the most expensive disasters on the planet. And all of it began with ignored warnings and unchecked assumptions. Number 8, the SNCF train fiasco. $68 million in two wide trains in 2014. France's national railway operator SNCF proudly rolled out its ambitious fleet of 2,000 new regional trains. These weren't just any trains, they were modern, comfortable, climate-controlled, and designed to serve millions of commuters more efficiently than ever. The entire transportation upgrade cost over $20 billion, and the trains themselves represented a major chunk of that investment. However, soon after the first trains arrived, officials realized something no one had caught during design or testing. The trains were simply too wide. Specifically, they were too wide for more than 1,300 rural platforms spread across the country. The specifications used in the design had relied only on newer stations built after the 1990s, completely disregarding older infrastructure still in use, some of it dating back to the early 1900s. As a result, the new trains couldn't enter these stations without scraping or risking damage. The blame fell squarely on SNCF and the infrastructure manager RFF, both of whom pointed fingers at each other. RFF said they provided the measurements requested. SFF claimed they weren't informed about the outdated platforms. Regardless, the result was an international embarrassment and an immediate logistical crisis. To fix the problem, crews were deployed to widen hundreds of station platforms in a massive nationwide effort. The cost an additional $68 million. And that doesn't even count the delays, reputation, damage, or public frustration. Critics called it the perfect example of French bureaucracy gone mad. High-tech trains built for platforms no one bothered to measure. Became a punchline in the press, but behind the humor was a hard truth: when massive systems forget to check the basics, the fallout can be staggeringly expensive. #7 The Sagging Tower. Walkie-talkie meltdown in London, in the heart of London's financial district, stands. A 38-story skyscraper with a curved glass facade that earned it the nickname the Walkie-talkie. Officially known as 20 Finch Street, the building was envisioned as a bold piece of modern architecture. With a bulging upper section and panoramic views of the city, it quickly became one of the most recognizable buildings on the skyline. But shortly after it opened in 2013, something very unexpected began to happen. Cars parked on the street below started to warp, paint blistered, plastic components deformed. People were confused until one journalist left a thermometer outside and recorded temperatures high enough to fry an egg. That's when engineers realized the building's concave glass exterior was concentrating sunlight into an intense beam, essentially creating a solar death ray aimed directly at the street. The reflection was so powerful that it melted parts of a Jaguar parked nearby and reportedly set doormats and bicycle seats on fire. Londoners dubbed the building the Walkie-scorchy, and suddenly what was supposed to be a triumph of design became a global joke. How could this happen? The answer lies in basic physics. When a building with a concave surface faces the sun, especially in summer, it can act like a parabolic mirror focusing light to a single hot point. Architects had simulated wind resistance and energy efficiency, but had failed to simulate how the building's curved surface would behave under real sunlight in a city environment. The solution involved installing an exterior shading structure called a brizolile to diffuse sunlight and eliminate the glare. But that fix cost millions. Between the redesign, legal claims from property damage, and the loss of public confidence, the building's developers were forced to pay over $13 million in additional costs. And perhaps the bigger price was reputational. Raphael Vigli later admitted he had unconsidered London's high sun angles during design. The Walkie-scorchy became a cautionary tale. When design trumps practicality, it's not just embarrassing, it's expensive. A structure meant to symbolize modern sophistication ended up cooking the sidewalk and its reputation alike. #6. The AOL Time Warner merger. $200 billion vanished in the early days of the internet. Boom. AOL stood as a digital titan, dominated dial-up services, had millions of loyal subscribers, and was seen as the gateway to the online world. Time Warner, meanwhile, was one of the most powerful media empires on the planet, owning HBO, CNN, Warner Bros., and Time Magazine. When the two companies announced their merger in January 2000, it was hailed as visionary. The internet and media would become one. Traditional content would merge with cutting-edge digital distribution. On paper, it was brilliant. The deal was valued at $350 billion, making it the largest corporate merger in U.S. history at the time. Media outlets called it the blueprint of 21st century business. But that dream began unraveling almost immediately. AOL's subscriber base began to shrink as broadband internet replaced dial-up. Suddenly, the company that was once the gateway to the internet looked outdated and clunky. Worse, the cultures of the two companies clashed violently. Time Warner's executives were old-school, media-savvy veterans. AOL's leaders were dot-com cowboys, fast-talking, risk-embracing, and brash. The synergies they promised never arrived. Internal wars erupted, revenues fell, investors panicked. Then the dot-com bubble burst, wiping billions off AOL's inflated stock price, which had propped up much of the deal's valuation. By 2002, the combined company reported a jaw-dropping $99 billion. Write down the largest corporate loss ever recorded at that time. Time Warner shareholders were livid. AOL's executives were ousted. Merger of the millennium had become the disaster of the decade. By 2009, AOL was spun off and left to drift into obscurity. Time Warner never fully recovered the prestige or capital it had before the deal. In the end, more than $200 billion in value was erased. This wasn't just a bad deal. It was a monument to overconfidence and tech hype. Lesson in what happens when companies chase trends without understanding the substance behind them. Today, it's studied in business schools as a cautionary tale of inflated egos, mismatched missions, and how even the biggest giants can trip over their own ambition. Hesh 5, the rogue trader at Societe Generale, $7.20 billion lost in secret. In early 2008, just as the global economy teetered on the edge of collapse, French banking giant Societe Generale stunned the world by announcing it had uncovered a rogue trading scandal of unimaginable scale. One man, Kerviel, a mid-level trader in the bank's Delta One products division, had single-handedly amassed unauthorized positions totaling over $70 billion. To put that into perspective, that was more than the entire market capitalization of the bank itself. It wasn't stealing money. It wasn't trying to embezzle funds or stash cash in offshore accounts. No, he was trying to prove himself. Kerviel wanted to be seen as a star trader, so he made high-stakes bets, created fake hedging positions to cover them, and exploited weak internal controls. For months, his trades were wildly successful on paper. His managers noticed the profits but didn't ask questions. Why look too closely when someone is raking in millions for the bank? But when market volatility increased and the bets began to crumble, Kerviel's house of cards collapsed. The bank discovered the fraud, and in a matter of days, it was forced to unwind his positions in a fire sale, locking in an immediate $7.2 billion in losses. That figure made it the largest rogue trading scandal in history. Kerviel was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 2 years suspended. In addition, he was ordered to repay the full amount, a symbolic ruling. Since Kerviel would never realistically repay the billions, internally, the bank launched a complete overhaul of its risk and audit systems, but the damage was already done. The incident shattered investor confidence, tanked the bank's stock, and forced the French government to step in to stabilize its financial institutions. Amid the looming 2008 crisis, it also exposed a terrifying truth, that even in the most regulated, technologically advanced financial systems, a single person could still bypass all controls with enough determination. And all because no one wanted to question a trader who appeared to be winning. The scandal became a parable of hubris and systemic blindness where ambition met oversight failure and nearly a miracle brought a 150-year-old institution to its knees. Number 4. The Mizuho Fat Finger Trade. $225 million in one typo. December 8, 2005. The Tokyo Stock Exchange was buzzing like usual when a routine sell order entered the system. Mizuho Securities, one of Japan's top financial firms, intended to sell one share of a relatively new company called JCOM Co. at a price of 610,000 yen. Simple. Safe. But instead, someone on the trading desk made a catastrophic error. Instead of entering one share at 610,000 yen, they entered 610,000 shares at 1 yen each. It was a simple data entry, slip a misplaced hand, a missed keystroke, but the consequences were anything but simple. Here's the problem. JCOM only had 14,500 total shares outstanding. Yet Mizuho's order attempted to flood the market with over 600,000 phantom shares. Rather than flag the mistake, the exchange's automated systems allowed the order to go through. Chaos erupted. High-frequency traders instantly swooped in to buy up the massively undervalued shares. The market for JCOM collapsed. Mizuho's team realized the error within minutes and frantically tried to cancel the trade. But the Tokyo Stock Exchange's system didn't allow cancellations of orders below market price once placed. There was no undo button. Mizuho had no choice but to buy back the shares at full market prices, a frantic effort to close the hemorrhaging position, and honor a transaction that never should have been possible in the first place. By the time they were done, Mizuho had lost over $225 million all from a single typo. The incident caused a firestorm in Japan's financial world. The Tokyo Stock Exchange faced harsh criticism for not having safeguards in place. Their president resigned, Mizuho Securities suffered serious reputational damage, and triggered a complete reevaluation of digital trading safety in the country. The fat finger trade, as it became known, turned into a textbook case for financial firms worldwide. It was indeed just about a human error. It was about how an entire system allowed that error to propagate, grow, and destroy. $250 million in minutes. In modern markets where billions change hands in milliseconds, this failure proved that speed is nothing without failsafes. #3 Fire Festival, the party that burned $100 million. When the Fire Festival was first announced, it had everything an exotic island, luxury villas, list musical performances, and celebrity influencers pushing it as the most exclusive event of the year. It was marketed as the Coachella for the 1%. The promo video was slick, full of supermodels and turquoise water. The Instagram campaign was genius. Orange tiles posted simultaneously by famous influencers created a viral ripple effect. People rushed to buy tickets. VIP packages sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Private jets, gourmet meals, yacht parties, everything was promised. But what festival goers got was something closer to a disaster relief camp. When guests arrived at the Bahamian island, they found disaster tents soaked from rain the night before, piles of luggage tossed haphazardly, and absolutely no infrastructure. There was no music, no food, no villas, no plumbing. Attendees were stranded with no transportation, no schedule, and no communication. The now infamous image of a sad cheese sandwich in a styrofoam container became the symbol of broken promises. Behind the scenes, founder Billy McFarland had been scrambling for months to secure even the bare minimum. He had secured no permits, grossly overspent the budget, and made promises without contracts. As deadlines approached, he insisted on pushing forward, fabricating claims, and ignoring warnings from his own team. Blink 182 canceled days before the event. Staff were unpaid. Bahamian workers who spent days preparing the grounds were never compensated. The fallout was swift and brutal. Guests launched a class action lawsuit. Investors sued. The FBI got involved. McFarland was arrested and charged with wire fraud, sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, and ordered to pay $26 million in restitution. The total estimated loss from the Fire Festival, including unpaid bills, lawsuits, and destroyed business partnerships, surpassed $100 million. The Fire Festival became a cultural punchline, the subject of 2 documentaries and a symbol of influence-era deception. But it also exposed something deeper: how unchecked hype, social media illusion, and blind trust in visionaries can lead to a financial implosion of epic proportions. What began as a dream to create the next elite event ended as one of the most expensive and humiliating public failures in modern pop culture history. And for thousands, it wasn't just a meme, it was a nightmare vacation they'd rather forget. #2, the Challenger disaster. $1.2 billion in a national tragedy on the morning of January 28, 1986. Students across the United States gathered in classrooms to witness history. The Space Shuttle Challenger was moments away from launching into orbit, carrying a crew of 7 astronauts. But what made this mission extraordinary was the presence of Krista. McAuliffe, a schoolteacher from New Hampshire, selected to be the first civilian educator in space. It was a carefully planned publicity moment for NASA. There were banners, there were countdowns, there were millions of hopeful eyes glued to TV screens. Challenger broke apart in the sky. A fiery explosion consumed the shuttle, scattering debris into the Atlantic Ocean. All 7 crew members were lost. The nation was paralyzed. In the hours that followed, the media coverage turned from celebration to devastation. America mourned, but soon came the questions. What happened? Why was the launch approved despite freezing temperatures? Why were warnings ignored? The answers were disturbing. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, the contractor responsible for the solid rocket boosters, had raised concerns the night before the launch. They warned that the O-ring seals critical for keeping hot gases contained could fail in the extreme cold. NASA managers knew. The concerns were discussed. But the pressure to meet deadlines and keep the shuttle program on schedule outweighed caution. The warnings were overruled. When the O-ring failed, hot gas leaked, igniting the external fuel tank and destroying the shuttle in a fiery chain reaction. Financially, the Challenger disaster cost NASA over $1.2 billion in investigations, program delays, and redesigns. The shuttle program was suspended for nearly 3 years. But no price tag can measure the human cost, or the reputational damage to an organization that had once represented the pinnacle of technological triumph. In the years following, NASA underwent sweeping reform, safety reviews, accountability chains, and cultural shifts. But the Challenger explosion remains a defining failure in American history, not just for what it cost, but for what it revealed: that bureaucracy, ambition, and the desire for positive headlines can sometimes silence the very voices that might have saved lives. Number 1. CERN's Hadron Collider failure. A $4.40 billion halt from a single wire. Buried deep beneath the Franco-Swiss border lies one of humanity's most ambitious scientific instruments, a Large Hadron Collider, constructed by CERN. This 17-mile-long circular tunnel was designed to accelerate particles to near-light speeds and near-light speeds, smash them together to unlock the building blocks of the universe. With a budget exceeding $9 billion, contributed by dozens of nations, the LHC was a symbol of global scientific cooperation. But in September 2008, just days after the collider's grand debut, it failed catastrophically. The reason? A faulty soldering job on a single electrical connection? A busbar splice, roughly the size of a paperclip, failed due to subpar solder? This created resistance, which led to heat, which then caused a short circuit and a massive electrical arc. The arc punctured the supercooled magnets, releasing over 6 tons of liquid helium in a violent burst. The tunnel was damaged. Over 50 magnets had to be removed, cleaned, repaired, or replaced. It took 14 months before the collider was operational again. The final cost of the incident? Over $4.4 billion in delays, repairs, labor, and lost research time. That's not counting the scientific cost, hundreds of experiments. PhD timelines and international collaborations were frozen in place. The incident became known as the world's most expensive soldering mistake. Investigations revealed that quality assurance had been rushed in the final stages of construction. The fault had not been properly simulated under stress. What shocked people wasn't just the damage, it was that such a massive project had been vulnerable to such a small, almost invisible flaw. After repairs, CERN redesigned the electrical interconnects, graded safety systems, and implemented stricter installation protocols. When the collider was finally restarted in late 2009, went on to make history, confirming the Higgs boson particle in 2012, but the lesson remained. Even the most advanced scientific venture in human history can be brought to its knees by a wire no thicker than a pencil lead. The irony? Machine built to study the tiniest particles in the universe nearly destroyed itself because it overlooked one. In a place designed to uncover the secrets of creation, it was a man-made error that nearly collapsed it all. Throughout history, these catastrophes born from miscalculations, overconfidence, blind spots, and overlooked warnings have cost not just billions, but trust, time, and sometimes human lives. They remind us that behind every disaster lies a choice that could have gone differently. The numbers are staggering, but the real cost often lies in what could have been avoided. If you found this countdown jaw-dropping, now's your chance to turn that reaction into action. Hit that like button, subscribe for more mind-blowing top 10s every week, Share this video with someone who still thinks one little mistake doesn't matter. Because history proves sometimes that's all it takes.